Welcome to episode 5 of the Motorcar Marketing Podcast. I'm Ashley Myers with MotorcarMarketing.com. In this episode's main segment, I'm going to be interviewing Brock Klauser. Brock is an expert at pay-per-click and search marketing. If you've ever thought about trying to do pay-per-click or you're doing it and want to try and maximize your ROI, this interview is for you, so stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help us out by giving us a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread the word about the podcast, so it's very much appreciated. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send us an email at info@motorcarmarketing.com. I want to improve this podcast, so some honest, constructive feedback is very much appreciated. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on the blog and the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.motorcarmarketing.com/podcasts. If you'd like to get our free video, Selling More Cars on Craigslist, just go to www.motorcarmarketing.com and put in your name and email address in the form on the sidebar. This guide goes through all the recent Craigslist changes and shows you some actual statistics from dealerships who post heavily on Craigslist, both now and last year before the big changes were rolled out. So if you're wondering if you should still be posting your cars on Craigslist or wondering how to get more value out of Craigslist ads, definitely check out this free video. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing Brock Klauser, and we're talking all about pay-per-click marketing for car dealers. Here is the interview. Welcome, Brock, to the Motorcar Marketing Podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for your time today, Ashley. Appreciate it.
So to start out, I wonder if you can give us a quick overview of your career and how you got into pay-per-click marketing.
Yeah, sure. So I originally had finished my bachelor's degree at Penn State, and when I originally went into the advertising marketing field, I didn't really know much about digital. This was years ago. And what I had been taught on traditionally was really focused on, history of advertising, traditional media, et cetera. And really pay-per-click digital marketing, that was kind of in its genesis when I started out. So a lot of that was really self-taught. And luckily I had a couple mentors that kind of helped me through it. And my first marketing job, they decided to give me the reins on a pay-per-click account and learn as much as I could. And 7 years later and several jobs later, I'm still doing it now. I've been involved in several facets of paid search, not just paid search for automotive, but for retail, for B2B, affiliate marketing, mobile marketing, landing page optimization, and that's really kind of been my career over the last 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So let's now take a step back and maybe just define sort of what pay-per-click is. And I know there's a lot of car dealers I've dealt with that they literally don't even know what PPC or pay-per-click is. So maybe just kind of explain what it is and kind of an overview of how it works and how they can maybe just see it on the Google, .com page.
Yeah, sure. So, I guess to begin with, pay-per-click has evolved a lot, especially over the last 3 or 4 years. And usually when we talk about paid services, paid search, pay-per-click, it not only involves traditionally it's just in the text ads that show up. Usually, obviously you see that in Google results, but also Bing, Yahoo, AOL, other search partners. Right now, it's changed the way it's visually brought up on a search engine results screen within Google. Today, it's usually denoted by a little yellow button that says Add next to it, which traditionally appears at the top and on the right-hand side of the page. But I think paid search as a definition has gotten a lot broader. A lot of people will associate it with any kind of display, banner, image ads that you're buying within the Google display network or other search networks. So that could be a part of it. It could also be a part of a larger network with pertaining to YouTube. And Google owns YouTube, and you can put display ads and pre-roll video ads on YouTube, and our paid search team does buying for that. We also do buying on other display networks, not just Google, on other display networks across the United States. So I think it's kind of evolved over time. It's a lot bit broader of a term, but traditionally it's always been kind of those core text ads that you see within a search engine results page.
Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is, as someone who wants to get those ads, what sort of, again, in a nutshell, how do you go about getting yourself into being one of the companies that gets displayed there? Yeah,
sure. So to get started, really, and if we're talking about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, it's Google. And to really get started, it's basically either someone internally in-house or having a vendor work for you or an agency partner to set up an AdWords, what's called a Google AdWords account. AdWords is the advertising platform that Google uses to sell its pay-per-click or its text ad space. And basically it takes kind of a realization of who your market is, what area you're going to target, keyword searches that people would put in to find your business, setting up some bidding, some ad copy, and from a very top-level standpoint, that's really all it takes to get started in paid search. Once you have that all together, it's literally a matter of days you can get up and running and have your ads appear in Google.
Yeah. And that's really the key, is it's a bidding system, is you put in how much you're willing to pay per click, and you get listed or not listed, depending if you're willing to spend the money on the clicks versus the other people bidding on those same keywords.
Yeah. Not to get too deep, but basically it's exactly what it is. It works on a bidding system, and what Google uses is something called ad rank. And your rank is determined by, one, what you're able to bid, how high you're able to bid, and two, what's called your quality score, which has a lot of different factors, but Google basically uses what's called a quality score algorithm to grade, the relevancy of the keyword search to your ad copy, to your landing page, how high your click-through rate is. There's several factors that are involved in that. Usually we see the higher the quality score is, the less you pay per click, and actually the amount you'll be able to rise in the ranking. But traditionally it's all based on a bidding system, and you usually only pay on a cost per click basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now just you mentioned obviously Google. What are some of the other companies that have similar products?
Yeah, so there are a lot of other search partners that Google has. I think when people think of bidding within Google, they think of just Google, but Google actually works with a lot of other, smaller tier search engines that still get, a fair share of the market. Google at any time is probably around 70 to 80% of market share, but there's websites like AOL.com, Ask.com that are actually Google search partners. So you can actually opt in when you set up a campaign to have not only have your ads appear in Google, but also within the search partners network as well. That takes up a small percentage. The other big one, there's two that we're actually thinking about. One is Bing, Yahoo. They have a search alliance together, which basically means that if you want to set up a campaign within the Bing system, it'll automatically be entered into the Yahoo market as well. They have between the two of them, about 15 to 20% of market share for search. So they're definitely smaller than Google, but nothing to be ignored. And then the other one would be really YouTube. Now, not everyone really thinks of YouTube as a search network, but a lot of people do their searches, whether it be entertainment focused or whether it be informational focused. But a lot of searches are being done on YouTube every day. Google owns YouTube, as I mentioned, and there's different number of advertising options within Google. And now we're seeing within automotive as well some other smaller kind of third-tier search parties that you can work with. Many people are aware of the partnerships you can do with AutoTrade or Cars.com. Mm-hmm. There's also a company called LotLinks that works with just auto search websites, and they pretty much try to take your inventory and put them into these third-party search sites. So when someone's looking up within classified sections of for a car, your ads can actually appear there, and you can link back to VDP pages. So like I mentioned, the industry is growing, and it's not just from a complete retail or total market standpoint, but also from an automotive standpoint as well.
Yeah. So as I think everybody understands, Google is obviously the one with the most traffic, and Bing is a distant second. But do you see any differences in and let's this is maybe specific to the auto industry. Do you see any differences in the quality of traffic from Bing versus Google? Are the people who click from Bing more likely to buy a car? Do you see any differences from that?
Yeah, that's a great question. From a car buying perspective, it's kind of tough. We're still doing a lot within the industry to kind of figure out, who's the most qualified shopper, where are they coming from? That equation is still being solved right now. I can tell you traditionally from a click standpoint, from a lead standpoint, we see a little bit better quality volume from Google. That's not to say that Google and Yahoo shouldn't be tested. I have a number of clients that have success with Google, but also have success with Bing and Yahoo. Mm-hmm. Bing is kind of behind the times a little bit, so to speak, on their technology compared to Google. Bing is owned by Microsoft, and the majority of their revenue is not necessarily made in ad dollars, where Google, the large majority of their revenue is done in paid search, display, YouTube. So they're always trying to come up with new technologies and new ways for their advertisers to take advantage of shoppers and for clicks. But with automotive specifically, really we've seen that the majority of the clicks that we get are with Google, and that a lot of the leads that we'll get are also through Google. Bing has come out with different ways to take advantage of new leads. Google's had something out for years now called call extensions, where you'll actually be able to put your phone number within the ad itself. So if someone's on their mobile phone or even on their PC and they want to call someone at the dealership right away, as opposed to going to the website and maybe looking up different inventory, that's something that can be done in Google and tracked. Within the last several months, Bing has added that to their arsenal as well. There's still some things, I think, being worked out on the back end with Bing, but they are allowing call extensions to be added into their advertising. You can also do conversion tracking with Bing. So it'll kind of be interesting to see, even though Bing is a little bit behind the times, what they'll be doing within the next several months to try to make themselves a player and see if these different lead opportunities can pan out for them as far as quality.
Yeah. So now let's kind of maybe just take a step back and think about I think that's a good overview of what pay-per-click is and paid search is. So how can a car dealership get started with automotive pay-per-click? I mean, what's sort of their first step? How do they decide on keywords? And maybe you could even break this down, new car dealers versus used car dealers.
Yeah, sure. So as far as new car dealers, a lot of the dealerships we work with have both new and used inventory. But if we wanted to kind of divide out, I think for both types of dealerships, the first two things we always want to do is first, who is your audience? Who is your target audience? What type of shopper are you looking for? What types of searches do you think they'll do to find you on the internet, or what types of searches would you like them to do to find you on the internet? And that information you probably already have a good idea about if you've ever done any traditional advertising, is one, who your target market is. And this really goes back to a holistic marketing level. It's not from a paid search level, but just knowing who your audience is. Number two, who your competitors are in your area and what makes you different from them. And if you have different offers, inventory, et cetera, that can help you stand out from them, that will help you gain some traction within paid search. I think those are the first big two. From there, it's usually what we do traditionally at stream companies is if we have a dealer that's interested in starting pay-per-click and getting their feet wet a little bit, they'll actually come to us and say, hey, this is who we are, this is our history, these are the type of vehicles we have on our inventory, and from there we try to put together what we call just a little proposal. Is Google has some tools on the back end that different PPC, or pretty much any PPC vendor can use to get an idea of, maybe what types of keywords would work best for you, what geographic targets would you want to go after, and then ultimately, how much is it going to cost me? How much do you think I'll anticipated pay per click? How much how much budget do I need per month in order to have significant, making market saturation in my area. And so it doesn't really matter if you're new or used. I think the process is pretty similar in both respects. I will mention one thing, that if you're strictly a used car dealer, Google does have some things in place, some parameters in place to sometimes try to discourage certain dealerships from bidding on certain keywords. So let me give you an example. If you're a Ford dealership and you strictly sell Ford cars, but you have a lot of used cars on your lot that are not just Ford but also other makes and models, and you start putting advertising online on Google, strictly going after some of these off-brand used, Google could, and I've seen this before, it doesn't happen every time, but it does happen sometimes, they'll actually disapprove your ad because your dealership isn't directly associated with that brand. So if you're not a Ford dealer, technically they don't want you selling anything off-brand. You might get disqualified for that brand because your dealership isn't associated with that brand. So there are some tools in the background that Google uses to kind of associate dealerships by brand. So to say that not that you can't do off-brand advertising with Google, it's not that they will, necessarily shut your account down, but they do have tools in place to try to keep you focused on the brands that you currently work within, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So maybe we could even get some specifics. Let's just talk about, like you were mentioning, like come up with, who are your competitors, who are your customers. Maybe we could just kind of run through that, how that actually applies to setting up the pay-per-click campaign. So if you're just like a used car dealer, you have 100 cars, maybe you're in more of the upper end of the market, BMWs, Audis, Mercedes, but you're just a used car dealer. So, what are those steps? Are you telling people, I'm curious to hear your opinion on this. Is that used car dealer going to bid on, 2003 BMW 325i? What keywords are they specifically going to go after? Just some examples.
Right. So, if you're specifically a used car dealer and you're looking to sell the inventory on your lot, I guess two ways I want to answer this. One is, if you want to get an idea of who your competition is, you probably know in your area who is selling cars, who is selling specific models related to you, who would be your direct competition, but that always doesn't equate to paid search. Some of these competitors may be doing paid search, maybe they aren't. There's something specific you can look up within Google, and it's called Google Ad Preview Tool. If you do a search for that, it'll come up and you should be able to see it. And when you click on that link, you'll actually be able to kind of manipulate a search that's being done. You can put in whatever keyword that might be privy to you. So if you have a lot of used BMW 3 Series on your lot, you can do a couple searches related to those cars. You can put in whatever geographic area you're in, and Google will theoretically give you a preview of what that page would look like, and it'll show you, what advertisers are currently bidding on those keywords at that specific time. And what I like to do is kind of do a couple searches like that throughout the week and see who consistently pops up, and that will really give you kind of a pretty good idea of who your competition is. Because like I said, you may know the competitors are backyard, but you don't necessarily know which ones are bidding on certain keywords.
And how does that, knowing your competitors, though, how does that translate into what you're going to do with your pay-per-click campaign?
Well, from a strategic standpoint, at the end of the day, if your account's set up the best way it can, you're going up with the right keywords, you're getting all your targeting and all your account structure set up great, that's awesome. But at the end of the day, to get people to click through to your website, really what it consists of is ad copy. And making sure that the ads that are come up on screen for the keywords that qualify for your search, that there's something that you can talk about in your ads that sticks out from the rest. So having the knowledge of what your competitors have on their lot and what kind of ad copy they're using in order to drive clicks to their website, I think is really going to be a great first step for your dealership to try to figure out, okay, this is maybe my competitive advantage for these types of keywords. Maybe they have a lot more Mercedes than I do in stock, and that's something that they have competitively that works really well for them. I know that maybe A, B, and C I do really well, and X, Y, and Z they do a little bit better than me. Maybe you want to focus at first on A, B, and C, really speak to that, and try to see if you can drive more clicks comparatively because you are really stronger in that area. And so I think that's really the first step that you want to take is realizing who is my competition and what are they really trying to push out into the market to try to gain clicks, and how can I kind of either overcome that or how can I decide what I want to go after versus maybe what I could kind of leave by the wayside because maybe I'm not as strong in certain models, certain areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see. So, and then on the new dealership side, I mean, one of the things that occurs to me is that the used dealers, I mean, they have maybe one or two, maybe five, of sort of a similar car, whereas a new dealership, they're going to have, dozens of basically the similar cars, so they can go after much broader terms, as you say, like BMW 3 Series, because they're going to have they're going to have tons of these, whereas a used dealership, excuse me. So do you have some recommendations, like some specific keyword recommendations, what you've seen actually work? Is it a year, like for a used car dealer, is a year, make, model as a keyword? Is it just the model, BMW 3 Series, the make and the model? And then what would maybe work for a new dealership?
Yeah, so for used, it's a little bit more tricky because, as you mentioned, with a new dealer, if you're a Ford dealership, let's say for example, going back to Ford, that over the course of the next 6 months, you're probably going to have probably your 5 core models that you're always going to have in stock and have a lot of and got to move off your lot, and then there's probably another 5 to 10 that you're probably going to consistently have. Maybe you don't want to push as strongly as others, but that certain year, make, models you're always going to have on your lot. So you can always try to find new keywords and test out new keyword ideas with those kind of core products. Versus used, it's kind of a mixed bag, and it's a little bit more difficult to pin down because like any other product-related website or almost like an e-commerce website, what's moving in and out of your website and out of your lot is it's tough to pin down because your cars can move at any given pace, and you're not going to have the same makes and models on your lot at any given time. So with used, it's that kind of core searches that you can go after, core keywords that a new dealership would have. You really don't have that opportunity. Mm-hmm. A lot of the used dealerships I work with don't have a core 5, 6 makes and models that they have. They might have several different kinds. If a lot of dealerships we work with have anywhere from 50 to 200 used cars on their lot, and they could be anything and everything. Mm-hmm. So things that we look at from a used perspective is there's different pieces of software that you can use on the back end and also within Google, which basically these software tools are based around what's called dynamic searches. And what that basically entails at a top level is at any given time having a piece of software that can scan your current inventory or VDP pages, most notably your used VDP pages, to get an idea of what currently the makes, models, and years you have on your lot. And then when people are doing searches for those year, make, models, or even if the used, Mercedes E600 that was from several years ago, if you have that on your lot, what the software tries to do is match up the search with anything that you might have on your lot. Mm-hmm. And if it qualifies with something that's close to or is within your lot, then this ad will basically dynamically generate in the headline or somewhere in the body what that model is and try to link directly to that VDP page. If the search is being done and it's not on your lot, well, then the software does whatever it can to make sure that your ads don't appear because you're not qualified. You don't want someone searching for a 2010 BMW 328i and your ad appears for a 2006 Subaru Forester. I mean, that's a horrible user experience. So with used and new, it's kind of done a little bit differently, and we're seeing more and more Google and other software providers really try to build up their credibility and and the amount of technology they have to put towards what's called dynamic search, or search that's done on a dynamic basis because your products move in and out so quickly on your lot. And it's kind of, I mean, there's been software providers that have been out for a couple of years now, but Google's only really started doing the whole dynamic feed, dynamic ads within the last 6 to 9 months. So they're really in their infancy here. They're still testing things out. I know at our agency we're testing out different software providers, different ways that Google manipulates the dynamic search and how that works for our clients. So this is something that's all very new, but very exciting for used dealerships.
Yeah, sure. So let's turn to the geographic targeting, because certainly for car dealerships, this is imperative that they only target people that are within a certain distance. So maybe you can give us some tips and about what you see working in terms of geo-targeting.
Yeah, that's a great question. Most vendors that I work with from on the client side, when I start with a dealership, they have a pretty good idea of the geo-targeting capabilities that Google, has really come out with within the last several years. But usually, to start off with, most dealers are just, hey, I know who my core audience is. They're 20, 25 miles from my dealership. Maybe if they're in a really tighter DMA, it might be 10 to 15 miles. If they're more rural, it might be 30 to 50 miles. But they have a pretty good idea of where their customers are coming from their sales data. Mm-hmm. They also have other data sources like Polk or Data, and what they try to do is try to take that kind of that off dealership information and see, okay, where maybe I'd be losing sales at, where I'd like to beef up, my advertising to try to steal away some searches and some leads from areas that I should be getting more sales from. But what's interesting is Google can actually, Bing, Yahoo, not so much, but Google can definitely get really refined with your targeting. So you can not only do radius targeting around your dealership, but you can target by, obviously you don't want to go by state or maybe by county, but you can target by county, by city, even down to the zip code level. You can do radius targeting around certain zip codes, and you can mix and match all this stuff as well. So if, like I said, for example, that that maybe there's 5 or 6 towns that you really want to go after, you can bid more aggressively on those particular cities, and you can still have a radius targeting for other areas and maybe bid less aggressively on others, but you're not just set at your radius of where you want to be. You can actually get pretty surgical with how you want to go after your potential customers and potential shoppers for your lot. And part 2 of that is once you've gotten started up in paid search and you start collecting lead data and you start collecting some geographic information, on the back end within Google, there's different reports you can generate, one of them being a geographic report. And you can look at it by city almost down to zip code level, by county, and you can see, which areas are you getting the most searches from, what areas are getting you the most clicks, costing me the most money, getting me the most website conversions or the most leads. And then you can also take that data and over time refine your marketing mix and your geographic targeting. Like I said, if you're finding some areas get you more leads for more bang for your buck, you probably want to maybe put more money into that area or bid more aggressively and bid down on other areas. So, as far as geographic targeting goes, there's a lot of different options with Google, and that really works out well for small and medium-sized businesses, which most car dealerships that we deal with, especially from a Tier 3 perspective, can take advantage of.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what do you think of the time of day options? That's another option that Google offers. Do you recommend that dealers only show their ads during normal business hours when there's an employee there to answer the phone? What have you seen work with that?
Yeah, and that's another great question. At the top level, when you're looking at all of this, whether it's keywords, geographic, time of day, day of week, you should never really go off of your gut. The best friend that a paid search person has is data. And with data comes a lot of ROI information, a lot of click information, cost information. And the more information you have and the more data you get over time, the more you'll be able to kind of get feedback on, okay, from this, like I mentioned, this geographic area, Maybe there's areas we can bid more aggressively on than others. There also are reports, like you mentioned, hour of the day reports, day of week reports, where you can break those same metrics as far as clicks, costs, conversions down by hour of the day. So I wouldn't necessarily say to a dealer, hey, you shouldn't be advertising at certain times of the day. I would rather let the campaign run for a little bit, collect the data, and try to get a realization of when those certain times of day are that would be most adequate to be broadcasting your ad, especially if you're kind of limited by your budget. If you only don't want to spend a lot at first, there may be hours of the day you completely cut out and not even have your advertising up and running. But you may be surprised. You may find that between 11 and midnight, you're getting maybe not a ton of searches, but your cost per conversions are a little bit lower than other times of day. So I wouldn't always go by your gut and say that there's definitely a right or a wrong answer for every dealership. It's always going to be depending on, you know, the market that you sell to, the competitors that are in your market, and your own data that you can take advantage of to make decisions.
Sure. So now let's turn a bit to and talk about some metrics and the metrics that you think are important to measure. You've mentioned like these various reports, whether it be the geo-targeting or the hour of the day reports. What metrics do you think is important for a car dealership to look at?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about selling cars. And like I mentioned earlier, as an industry, we're growing and getting better and better, realizing, okay, which traffic sources are driving clicks, leads, phone calls, and then hopefully, you know, sales, and really starting to hopefully close the loop on all those things. I mean, that's the ideal situation, is what is my ideal ROI for every marketing channel that I have. And it's not just paid search, it's anything within digital and, you know, someday hopefully traditional. But the metrics that we really try to look at, there's a few that we really try to speak to with our clients each month. One is, you know, things that you've probably heard about before, your click-through rate, so how often someone clicks on your ad after they see it, so it's clicks divided by your ad impressions. The higher your click-through rate is, usually the more relevancy you have. It tells the story of you know, how engaged usually audiences are with your ad copy. So if you have a high click-through rate, you're probably doing some things right at the basic level. But you also, there's some other things that you want to look at. One is called impression share. Impression share is basically, the impression share is what's also known as maybe your search market share, or how often your ads are appearing in the search results for a keyword that you're bidding on. And there could be a number of reasons why your ad does or does not show up. It could not show up due to a limited budget. It could not show up due to a low ad rank for certain keywords, where maybe your ad's appearing at the bottom of the page or on page 2, so you don't even have a really chance to be in that auction. So those are the things that that's one thing we like to go over with our dealers each month is, hey, do you have, you know, if you're having great return in paid search, do you have that adequate amount of budget in order to support the searches that are being done? And this can change on a monthly basis. Search is not kind of a set it and forget it business. It's all based on the amount of searches that are being done. So we know that some months and certain times of year we're going to have more searches than others. So we want to be able to, if you want to have full market penetration, have the budget available for that. Other metrics that we really kind of concentrate on are, from a lead standpoint, conversions, phone calls are really the two big ones. Recently, we've seen over the last, I would say, 18 months, that web conversions have kind of consistently started to drop off a little bit. When buying a car, what is considered a web conversion? Someone signing up for an email list, or someone filling out the form saying, please contact me? That's an email. That's a website conversion? Yeah, traditionally, yes. That's how we measure it. It could be a form on your contact page. It could be if you schedule a test drive form, get a quote, any type of form where they ideally at least give you their name and email address, hopefully maybe phone number as well. But that's how we usually denote a conversion. From a mobile standpoint, we've also seen some of our dealers want to measure, okay, if people are coming over from their mobile phone and they're looking up directions to my dealership, we want to count that as conversion as well, because, you know, if if you're driving down the car, on the weekend and you're looking to maybe do some shopping, and your wife's sitting next to you and they're trying to look up a dealership and they look up directions on their mobile phone, that's usually a key indicator that they're trying to find where you're at and arrive there. So we may even use that as an indicator. But from a traditional standpoint, it's usually web conversions is a form that's filled out and sent to the dealer.
Okay. I wonder if you have some. Go ahead.
No, what I was saying earlier is that we're actually seeing a trend now that web conversions are starting to decrease by dealership. We're finding more people are less likely to fill out a web form, to fill out a conversion form, give you their contact information and email address or phone number. 5, 6, 7 years ago, that was kind of the gold standard of internet conversions for dealerships, is really getting as many leads as possible through web conversions. And those lead generation sources have started to fall off. We're seeing more phone calls, more people doing chat sessions, and more people just doing their own research and just showing up to a dealer, which is really tough to try to calculate ROI for, because if they're just doing a bunch of searches and then showing up, there's really no conversion metric there to trigger ROI. So other things that we're looking at are actually VDP views per traffic source. And it doesn't necessarily mean that someone's filling out a lead form, but there's been studies done by Cobalt and LotLinks and some other third-party analytics providers that have seen consistently that the more VDP views that a car gets, the less time it spends on lot. And we're starting to use that more and more now as a key indicator by traffic source of, if web leads are falling off a little bit, maybe we can use other types of information to generate who our ideal shopper might be. And those are one of the metrics that we're looking at as well.
Define VDP for us.
Yeah, sure. So the kind of industry jargon, I guess, within auto dealer websites is SRP and VDP. SRP would be a search results page, or if basically it's your inventory listing by model. So if we'll go back to the Ford example. If you're a Ford dealer and someone brings up the page of all your 2014 Ford Focuses or Ford Fusions, that would be that total list there would be considered a search results page or an SRP. A VDP would be a vehicle details page. So anytime somebody actually ends up on a page that specifically speaks to a certain make or model by VIN. So I don't want to maybe necessarily have the list of all the black Ford Focuses that you have in that list. That would be an SRP listing or an SRP page. If they come onto a certain page where it has a specific VIN, specific vehicle, all your pictures, all those details that you have from a vehicle level, that would be considered a vehicle details page or a VDP.
Perfect. So can you give us some rough idea about what people are going to pay per click? And again, give us some keyword examples and then what they would pay if they wanted to get started with pay per click.
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess that's kind of one of the $1 million questions, is how much is this going to cost me at the end of the day?
Yeah.
And when we do, the reason that when we start talking to a dealership who wants to get involved with either maybe starting pay-per-click or maybe even seeing if they can change some things around with their current strategy, we always like to do a proposal for them. And the reason that we do that is, like I mentioned before, Google has tools on the back end where we can look at your website, try to get a best idea of what those keywords or the searches are where people would want to come to your website, and obviously what customers we might want to gain through different searches. And depending on what those keywords are, it's really 3 factors: the keyword mix, the competitors or how competitive their marketplace is, and then your geographic location. And we take those 3 things and we use the tools that we have at our disposal to try to come up with, 1, what are our average cost per click going to look like, and then 2, based on the amount of searches that are being done each month, what is the ideal budget if I want to get involved? From a cost per click standpoint, it can be very varied. If there's not a lot of competitors in your area, if there's not if there's a lot of searches being done in your area. Those factors can kind of update you on and get you a little bit better idea of how much I'm going to pay. Mm-hmm. The average call dealer we usually see for CPCs, depending on the term, usually the key terms like dealership related, geographic, year, make, model, those really core searches, anywhere from $2.50 usually to $6 is what you'll expect to pay cost per click. Like I said, it can vary depending on where you're at, your competition, that sort of thing. From a cost per lead standpoint, either web conversion, phone call, paid search call, that can vary as well. Some dealers are in locations where people are more apt to fill out a lead form, so it's easier to calculate. It also depends on your kind of your call tracking situation. So if your website is set up to track calls by traffic source, that gives you so much more data to figure out what my ideal ROI is or cost per lead. But usually we see that's kind of a general number too, but we can see usually we see anywhere between $25 and I would say $90 cost per lead, sometimes up even over $100. Really depends on your tracking capabilities and also the way your website is set up and how easy it is to fill out either a web form or convert in some other way on the website.
Yeah, sure. That's great information. So let's talk a bit about stream companies for a minute. Can you give us kind of the 2-minute elevator pitch for what you guys do?
Yeah, sure. So Stream Companies is an full-service integrated ad agency. We're built right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We've been in the advertising business for over 17 years, and for the large majority of that time, we've been focused on auto dealers. We also work in retail as well, but majority of what we do is focused on automotive. We're a privately held ad agency. We have over 110 employees currently. We have offices in the Philadelphia area, D.C., North Jersey, California, and we're really focused at the end of the day on building partnerships with different dealerships. We work with Tier 3, some Tier 2, and at the end of the day, we're really, like I said, focused on being accountable, being a partner with your dealership, seeing what sets you apart from others, and if you wanted more information, we have a brand new advertising website just for car dealers called streamautomotiveadvertising.com, and it gives you a really good overview of dealers that we work with, some case studies, our capabilities, and I think it's a nice overview of who Stream is and who we are from an automotive standpoint.
Perfect. And so what's the best way for people to contact you if they want to follow up with a question or might be interested in your services?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're interested in the Stream services and what we have, I would say the best bet is to go to streamautomotiveadvertising.com. We have really easy ways to contact us there to get more information on paid search or digital or anything traditional. If there's any questions you want to ask me specifically about paid search, you definitely feel free to email me as well. My email address is Brock, B-R-O-C-K, @streamcompanies.com.
Perfect. And I'll list all that in the show notes. So if anybody wants, doesn't have time to write that down, they can just go to the show notes and I'll put a link directly back to streamautomotiveadvertising.com. So thank you, Brock. You've been very generous with your time. This has been very informative. I really appreciate your coming on the show.
Thank you as well, Ashley. It's been my pleasure.
If you're currently looking for a high-quality auto dealer website, check out our sister site, motorcarsites.com. We offer high-quality auto dealer websites at a very affordable price. Dealers can typically save between $50 and $150 per month by using our service. You can upload as many cars as you like at no additional cost. We automatically can export your cars to all the major platforms like Cars.com and AutoTrader, so you don't have to manage your inventory in multiple locations. We can have your new website up and running usually in less than 24 hours. Setup is free and easy, and there are no long-term contracts, so you can cancel at any time. Check out motorcarsites.com to learn more. Just a couple of comments on today's interview with Brock. As I listened to the interview again while putting the podcast together, I realized that the things we talked about might seem confusing if you've never done any pay-per-click marketing. but it's really not that confusing to get started. I would really urge you to give this a try if you never have. Just go for the low-hanging fruit, collect data, and get familiar with how pay-per-click works. Google pay-per-click is the greatest marketing channel ever created, and I don't say this lightly. I've done a ton of online marketing over the years, and there's really nothing quite like Google pay-per-click. It's great for collecting data. Once you're familiar with it, it's fairly easy to use. New campaigns can be set up in just a few minutes. It's not easy to get it working properly and to get a positive ROI. There's a lot of competition for the good keywords, but if you can get it to work, there's a ton of volume, so it's very scalable. If you can figure out a model that works with Google pay-per-click, you can expand your geographic area, you can add more keywords, you can add more cars to your inventory, which gives you more keywords. And there's just a ton of volume on Google. So if you spend some time and can get it to work, it can really be a great source of leads. And this is one key thing that we didn't talk about in the interview. If you're careful, you won't lose a lot of money. That's very important. That's a very important thing I want to talk about. And I want to talk a bit more about it because we didn't really discuss it in the interview. One of the keys to Google pay-per-click is that you can set a max daily budget. So for instance, when you're starting out, you can set the max budget to $10 per day. That means at most you'll only lose $10 per day. Google's happy to do it. Once you've spent the $10 on clicks for the day, they simply automatically stop showing your ads, so you won't get any more charges. There's also a very nice setup wizard. Google understands that it can be complex and overwhelming, so when you sign up for a new account, they'll actually walk you through the setup process. They'll take you through each one of these steps, and everything will be explained as you go along. So you really don't have to remember to set all these complex advanced features that we talked about in the interview. You'll be walked through the process. So just sign up and don't worry about doing it wrong. Just put in some keywords that you think will work and add some text, some ads, type in some text that you think might work. Don't get too caught up in making everything perfect. Then set a max budget low enough so you don't care if you lose it all. Just consider it money spent on education. What's going to happen after a week or two is that you're going to get familiar with the interface, and all the things that we talked about today won't seem quite so complex. Then you can come back and re-listen to this podcast and really start to tweak your campaigns. Slowly, you'll start to get better at it and hopefully start to get some phone calls. Over time, you can increase your budget and expand your keywords. Just think about this. Just get in there, set your daily budget for $10, turn it off on the weekend. So you're only talking about 5 days a week. Just let it run and don't get too caught up in really tweaking, I got to have the perfect keywords or the perfect ad copy. Just get in there and get going. And if you go run it for a month, 5 days a week at $10 a day, you're only going to lose a couple $100, and that will be money well spent just to learn their system. Brock talked about Bing a little bit. Just don't even worry about Bing when you're starting out. Just concentrate on Google for starters. That's going to be the most of the traffic anyway, so get that to work before you even bother with Bing. I can set you up with a website that will track phone calls. So if you need more information about that, just send me an email, info@motorcarmarketing.com. And maybe after a while, once you sort of understand pay-per-click, you might consider bringing in an agency like Stream Companies, the one that Brock works for, to help out and really optimize things. If you've been working on your own campaign and understand at least the basics of how it all works, it's going to make working with an agency like Stream Companies much, much better. One thing I would like to make clear, though, Brock said in his experience, the cost per lead is anywhere from $25 upwards to $100. So make sure your model can support that. You're not going to be able to get leads much cheaper than that $25. If you're not able to afford $25 leads, you might consider examining your entire sales funnel to figure out why other dealers are able to afford $100 leads while you're not even able to afford $25 leads. But that's a discussion for another podcast episode. Anyways, that's our show. I hope you get some value out of it and it can help you grow your business. Thanks for listening.